this community of just inspiring women who are there to support each other. I'm going through quite a bit right now on a personal level. Today, the last 24 hours have been particularly difficult. And Dana said, you know, if you need to reschedule, we can reschedule. But I have to say that I wanted to be here because I felt that being in the presence, although virtual presence, of all of you would be a highlight of this day and would be something that I would appreciate. So thank you all so much for being here. If you can turn your camera on, I would appreciate it. As much as I'm so grateful for having technology and for, thank you, Vesna, and for having the, you know, ability to connect and connect remotely and for you to connect during your lunchtime. I miss being in person with people. I miss doing these things in the same room. And certainly just seeing your faces and seeing, okay, are you bored? Are you confused? Are you nodding? Are you smiling? Helps quite a bit, you know, gives me some feedback as well. So thank you for having me, and let's get started. I would first like to rewind to the year of 2018. It was summer of 2018. I was at a corporate retreat with my business, with my team, and I received an email that confused me, puzzled me, threw me off. Those might be synonyms, but also inadvertently changed the path of my career quite a bit. In that email, I was asked to be a speaker at a conference that was taking place in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Okay, the biggest event of its kind in the Middle East, organized by the Crown Prince himself. I read that email and I was really confused. Crown Prince, Saudi Arabia. Why was I going to be a speaker? I was not a public speaker at the time. I'd done something very minor and on a micro level. What was I going to speak about? Who was going to listen to me and why? And why me? What did I have to say? I'm sure a lot of you relate to those questions, right? Those imposter syndrome questions that we all get. You know, we ask ourselves when we have an opportunity. Somebody sees something in us, but we don't, and we start over questioning. It made absolutely no sense, no logical sense for me to say yes. To make the situation worse, in 2018, at that exact time, Canada was in a huge political conflict with Saudi Arabia. They had just kicked out our Canadian ambassador out of the country, and they were deporting all Canadians out of Saudi Arabia. And I'm Canadian. Why was I going to go? It made no sense to say yes. To add to that, as I started consulting people around me on this opportunity, should I go? Should I say yes? Everybody was saying no. My family, my business partner, my business entrepreneurial colleagues were saying this makes absolutely no sense. The time is wrong. Also, people kind of said, like, but why you? What are you going to talk about? It made absolutely no sense for me to say yes. And so I said yes. You see, it was in that moment that I realized that I was given an incredible opportunity. I was given an opportunity to have a voice. I was given an opportunity to have a platform. And that was the beginning of me creating my motto that I now have turned into my mission to speak up, to stand out, and to be radically authentic. You see, I believe that most of us hesitate to do that. Believe that most of us who are business owners are hiding behind our businesses. I believe that most of us who are business professionals are hiding behind our titles, sometimes even hiding our titles. Your stat that you showed, Dana, was mind-blowing. You'll need to send it to me. And I believe that there's incredible power and value that we bring, and an opportunity not only to get ahead ourselves, but we have an opportunity to inspire and impact others when we do find our voice and when we scale its reach and when we find our platform. Today, we're talking about personal branding, but personal branding is just a tool. It's just a tool that allows us to put ourselves out there. And a lot of people I'm seeing are hesitant when talking about the possibility of building their personal brand because it kind of sounds a bit narcissistic. I'm building a brand. I'm building my personal brand. A lot of people are not comfortable with that. So if we change the rhetoric and we talk today about just tools to put ourselves out there, that change of framework will make a change of paradigm makes a big difference. So let me share my slides with you. And what I want to show you first is the most baller picture I now own, my absolute favorite picture of all time, me in Saudi Arabia. And you will notice these are people I was representing entrepreneurs organization of which I'm member, EO. These are all EO members. I was the only speaker representing the organization. And as you can see, the only woman there. I show this picture to my 12-year-old daughter frequently, just putting it out there. It was my favorite picture, absolutely. So today we're going to be talking about the what, the why, and the how. What a personal brand is, because it's become quite a buzz phrase. So there's a lot of misconceptions surrounding it. We're going to talk about why you would benefit from having a personal brand. Again, every time you hear personal brand and you feel like, ooh, replace it with putting yourself out there. So why you would benefit from that. And then how you could do it in a way that would be structured, in a way that would feel radically authentic. Very important. We're seeing no doubt that the interest in personal branding is growing exponentially, right? Well, it's growing. You're here today and you knew this was the topic, so you are interested in personal branding too. But we're also seeing a spike in interest that we have in personal brands, meaning we're increasingly more interested in other people. And we're increasingly more interested in other people than we are in other companies. You know, if you look on social media and you compare the following that corporate brands have with the following that the founders of these brands have, you will consistently see an incredibly high delta in favor of the person, in favor of the human being. If you look at the following that Tesla and SpaceX have on Twitter combined, well, now that Elon Musk announced that he's purchasing Twitter, of course, he added over 10 million followers to his already high following. But this delta that I'm talking about held before as well. If you look at the following, his two flagship brands have on Twitter combined, his personal following is more than double. And it was more than double pre-announcement, more than double. You might have seen the story that was going viral on social media. As you're all aware, Ukraine, which is also my homeland, the country where I was born and where I grew up, Ukraine is at war. And you might have seen this tweet, a tweet that the vice prime minister of Ukraine sent to Elon Musk. He said, Elon, as you're trying to colonize Mars, we're struggling here with our internet connection. We need help. You know, when the war started, Ukrainians across the globe relied on connectivity with our family and friends back home. Our morning routines changed. We would text and message every single morning, making sure that our loved ones were okay. And in the first days of the war, we heard that the Russian forces were targeting cell phone towers because they wanted to disconnect Ukrainians from connectivity. So this tweet, Elon Musk replied to the same day, and he said Starlink is now activated in Ukraine and stations are en route. And now a lot of people in Ukraine are relying on this connectivity to be able to stay connected to each other and the rest of the world. This shows us the incredible power of personal branding. If Elon Musk, like him or loathe him, hate him, that's not the point. We're not promoting Elon Musk. But had it not been for the fact that he has such a strong visibility and such a strong personal brand, this would have never happened. If we stay on Twitter and we look at other brands, we'll look at Virgin and we'll look at all of their accounts combined, because of course they have the airlines and the mobile and everything else, over 2 million followers combined. Richard Branson, over 12 million. On LinkedIn, he has over 19 million followers. His following is continuing to grow exponentially. He posts every single day. And now that we are on LinkedIn, if you look at Spanx, Sarah Blakely's company, 78,000 followers. Sarah Blakely herself, 1.7 million. Now, at this point, a lot of people say, okay, Marina, but you're giving examples of celebrity brands, you give examples of celebrity entrepreneurs. What does it have to do, with anybody on a more local level? I encourage you to do the exact same exercise of looking at any local business and the following that business has on social media and comparing that following with the founder of that business, as long as the founder, of course, is putting him or herself out there, right? The delta will always be in favor of a person. If you look at a local Montreal organization called Women in Governments, you will see that they have just over 7,000 followers on LinkedIn. Big delta with the founder of the organization, Caroline Kodzi. She has over 30,000 followers. The delta is always there. Now, these numbers are relevant to entrepreneurs, to business owners. Not all of us are entrepreneurs and business owners. So to make this relevant to you, and why I'm showing you these examples in particular is just for you to see the delta between, interest in business, interest in people, and in leaders. If you're leaders within organizations, people who are looking to work in your organization, they're looking you up. When you're looking for a job, they're looking you up. And people will gravitate towards being interested in other individuals and other human beings. Now, personal branding seems like it's a fairly recent phenomenon. Wouldn't you say? It seems like all of a sudden, we're talking about it all the time. A lot of people tell me, Marina, I think it's a fad. I think it's going to go away. Honestly, I heard that about social media from people 15 years ago. It didn't go away, it continued to grow. What's interesting, though, is that the idea, the concept of personal branding, even though maybe we called it differently, has existed much longer than that. This gentleman right here, Tom Peters, he is a business thought leader on business topics, business excellence, leadership, etc. He is the person behind this famous quote, "True leaders don't create followers, they create more leaders." And Tom Peters wrote an article in 1997 called "The Brand Called You." And in that article, he talked about this idea of being the CEO of Me Inc. He wasn't talking about business owners. He wasn't talking about solopreneurs or entrepreneurs. He was talking about absolutely anybody, any professional becoming the CEO of themselves, becoming and looking at themselves as a corporation. It was an article in Fast Company. It's still available on Google if you're interested in checking it out. He's credited with being the first or one of the first people to talk about this topic. Now, when I talk to people about personal branding, and especially when I talk to women about personal branding, there are a few concerns that surface, okay? You let me know, and you can put it in chat whether these resonate with you. Here's some of them. But who am I to? Right? The imposter syndrome one. This is the one I had when I was asked to give a big talk in Saudi Arabia. Who am I to, why am I going to give a talk? Who am I? Who am I to have a brand? Who am I to have a personal brand? Who am I to? Imposter syndrome. There's a lot of research on imposter syndrome and how to deal with that. Who am I to can always be replaced with, but why not me? Why not? Why not? But this is a very common one. This is a second very common one. But what am I going to talk about? Right? Who wants to hear what I have to say? What am I going to talk about? Again, one of my concerns when I was offered to speak in Saudi Arabia. And this is a big concern of women, specifically in corporate, because of the growing prevalence of the cancel culture. What if I say something wrong? What if I say something and my employer is concerned that I said this? What if I, I don't know, speak out of turn? What if I say something and people think it's ridiculous? What if I'm, judged for what I'm saying? When you are building a personal brand, you're able to be intentional with it. Okay. If you start putting yourself out there without intention and just, start creating posts on social media, let's say LinkedIn, or start putting yourself out there without clarity, intention, and a plan, all of those concerns might have some validity. And that's why we're talking about it today, to give you clarity and to give you a roadmap so that you don't say anything wrong because you're clear of what your content's going to be. You know how you're positioning yourself, so you don't have to worry that, with the who am I to and with your imposter syndrome. We're talking about all those today. So working on your personal brand intentionally before putting yourself out there is what eradicates some of your concerns. So what is a personal brand? It's important for us to have some kind of a definition that we're working with beyond the act of us putting ourselves out there, which again is an easy one to operate with. Let's start with a more academic definition. A personal brand is a set of your unique characteristics. What are your unique characteristics? And a lot of people will say, well, Marina, what's unique about me? There's nothing unique about me. That's one of the things I hear more often. But it's your unique characteristics grouped as a whole. It's your core values. It's your beliefs. It's your experience. It's everything that makes you you in combination. It is absolutely unique. Rendered into a differentiated narrative, which means a couple of things. It means, well, your brand story, your story. It means a point of differentiation that you do have to identify because that is the foundation of having a brand. And it's also stories that you tell, stories that you share. The goal of building a personal brand is to position your expertise and your thought leadership, or for some people, it's to position themselves as influencers in the minds of your target audience. What's very important when we think about target audience is there's typically two. There's a target audience that has a direct impact on the work that you're doing. If you're an entrepreneur, it's clients. If you're an employed professional, it could be prospective employers or your current employer. But I would like to inspire you to also think of a second audience that you might have, an audience that you just want to inspire and impact yourself. For some, for many women, it's up and coming women. For many men, it's up and coming men. For me, it's immigrants. So you can think of what that target audience is that you would be inspired to speak to. However, if we simplify that academic definition and give us something even more operational to work with, a personal brand is merely who you are. So first you have to figure out who you are. That's important. Expressed through unique positioning. And our goal is to build associations in people's minds. So we have to consistently communicate who we are and put ourselves out there and tell stories and share information and share content so that we can create and build those very clear and consistent associations in people's minds. You have a brand when there are those clear associations that people have. So we talked about the what, we talked about the why. Now let's talk about the how. How do you build a personal brand? And today I'm going to give you 5 points of reflection. And after a session, Dana is also going to send you, I don't know if she already has, if not, she will send you a workbook where a lot of those questions are listed out and you're going to be able to really work through those things after a session together. So how do you build a personal brand? First, let's quickly talk about the why you build a personal brand. So look, there are a lot of reasons and sub-reasons, and you'll see when you see the workbook, you will see all those reasons listed out of why you would benefit from having a personal brand, but we can group it into 3 categories. 3 categories of the benefits you get from having a personal brand. And those are visibility, portability, and the platform. And this is uniform. This is uniform for anybody. If you're a business owner, if you're a business professional, doesn't matter. Visibility, portability, and a platform. What does visibility gives us? Visibility gives us opportunities. When we have visibility, we are like magnets and we attract opportunities to us. If you're a business owner, it brings you clients, it brings you prospective employees, it brings you potential partnership opportunities. When you are an employed professional, it brings you job opportunities. When you have visibility, you don't have to knock on doors anymore to apply for jobs. Those opportunities come to you. You start getting a lot of knocks on your door. Have a lot of opportunity for internal mobility as well when you have visibility and when you've positioned yourself as an expert or a thought leader. The second one is portability. And portability is key. Why? And a lot of people don't think about portability when building a personal brand, but then in retrospect, they say, I wish I had done it. Portability is important because a personal brand, if properly crafted, is not about what you do. A properly crafted personal brand reflects who you are. And that's what gives you portability. Because as you all know, whether you are a business owner or you are a professional, an employed professional, our journeys, our professional journeys are not linear, right? They're like this, and then we pivot, and then we transition, and then we do something else. And every time we pivot, or we want to transition, we feel like we're starting from scratch or almost starting from scratch. Yet when we have a strong personal brand and a strong foundation, it gives us that equity, that personal brand equity that stays with us. We're investing in building our names, which makes those pivots much easier. People are following us, people are paying attention to us, not because of what we do. They kind of don't care about that much. They follow us, they listen to us, they respect us because of who we are. And so when we transition what we do, we just transition our talking points. It does not become the defining characteristic of who we are. So a personal brand gives us a lot of portability. Finally, it gives us a platform. And this perhaps is one of my favorite ones. A personal brand gives us a megaphone. We're able to, so I told you visibility attracts opportunity. When we have a personal brand and we build a platform, we're able to talk about things that matter to us. We're able to impact and make a difference at scale because we have people that trust us, that know our brand, are familiar with us, and we're able to impact, inspire, and make a difference. You know, when the war in Ukraine started and I was sitting, cushy in Canada, feeling comfortable but heartbroken and wondering, what can I do? How can I help? I realized that my way of helping is my platform and my voice. And I started talking about Ukraine. I started talking about everything that was happening and started asking for donations. And I was able to make an incredible impact, even though I was completely, removed from the situation. So a platform is incredibly important and key. So the first point of reflection that I will give to you, you're not doing it right now, you'll do it later, but think of why you would build a personal brand. What would you get from it? What would be more important to you? Would it be visibility? Would it be portability? Would it be having a platform? In the workbook that you'll receive, you'll see it's broken down into more sub-points so you can get more specific and granular. I recommend that you do this if you are thinking of building a personal brand, because I guarantee this, okay? I guarantee this is a promise. Start working on building your personal brand. You will think of quitting and not doing it many times, okay? Why? Because you're not looking to be a global influencer likely. You have work to do. So every now and then you'll think, like, why am I doing this? Like, why am I putting myself out there? Why am I doing this again? I have other stuff to do. And then you'll go back to that reflection and it will remind you of why you're doing it. Visibility, portability, and or platform. And now let's talk about the how. Now let's get more tangible with the conversation. So again, to remind you, the working operational definition that we're looking at, the steps of carving out your personal brand come through understanding who you are. It's an exercise in introspection and a lot of reflection and a lot of self-awareness. One of the concerns that people have with the idea of personal branding is that it feels like it's an artificial construct that then you have to internalize. That is absolutely not true. The process of understanding your personal brand is rooted in radical authenticity. It's understanding who you are, introspection, and then packaging it in a unique way. That's the brand inside of things. We have to package it in a unique way. And then we have to consistently communicate it to build clear associations. So we go through a period of introspection. In the workbook, you're going to see a lot of different questions that you can ask yourself to go through that introspection. And then you work on creating your unique positioning. I will give you some examples, but this is the harder part to do, right? This is what in corporate branding or personal branding, that's why agencies such as mine, such as Brand of a Leader exist, because we're able to come up with catchy and unique concepts and positioning that make the process easier. I'll give you some examples so that you can use them as inspiration as you're reflecting on your own unique positioning. But I can also tell you that if out of everything I'm sharing with you today and the workbook, if you omit your unique positioning piece, let's say you're, I don't know, maybe you don't have that creativity to think of a unique positioning for yourself, or you're not looking to invest with working with a branding agency right now. But if you don't do that, and yet you do everything else that I'm talking about, and that's in the workbook, you're already going to be so much more ahead than a lot of people who start putting themselves out there, but don't do any of the steps that we're talking about. However, identifying a unique positioning is something that just brings everything together and gives a clear foundation to your personal brand, gives you almost a sense of pride and a purpose, if you will, to then go out and build that visibility and put yourself out there. I'll give you an example. We started working with a client of ours who had one of the most touching stories that I've heard from clients so far. She was born in South Korea, and she was abandoned by her family at the age of 4, left on the street with a little plastic bag with her documents and with a little note that says, "Please don't look for us. We're leaving her in hopes that she will find a better life." If you're mothers, you can understand how mind-blowing that is, right? 4 years old, that's not a 4-month-old. That's quite incredible. So she was picked up by an orphanage, and then eventually she was adopted by a Canadian family. But it was during the time where adoption was not quite regulated, so it was not a great adoption. And she went through a lot of struggle. She went through a lot of ups and downs and just a lot of adversity. She ended up working in interior design, and she ended up starting a business in interior design, which kind of also made no sense because she did not grow up, with this like sense of aesthetic around. She struggled quite a bit to make ends meet. She never even studied interior design, and yet she became incredibly successful. She built a 7-figure business, then she exited, then rebuilt a new one. And she was trying to understand why interior design and what was making her so successful. And then she finally understood her why, her reason for doing what she was doing. She realized that what drove her passion is that she was able to give people a sense of home that she never had. She always had a house, right? She always had a roof over her head, with the exception of that, hour that she spent on the street until she was picked up, but she didn't have a sense of home. And now she was working for people who also had a roof over their heads, but sometimes not a sense of home. And that was her why. So when she realized that and she told me that story, I said, we need to tell this story to other people, and you can inspire people, and we need to put you out there. And she said all those things of, oh, but who wants to listen to that? And what's so unique about it? And why am I going to talk about it? And you know what? And so as we started working together, we developed at Brand of a Leader a concept for her that we called interiority. And that concept represents the inner life that she has, the inner life of spaces that she builds for her clients, the inner life of the team that she's building and her company culture. So all of a sudden, she's not talking just about interior design. She's not talking just about her story, although that narrative is important and it inspires people. But now she talks about interiority and a search for interiority. All of a sudden, it gave her a purpose. All of a sudden, it inspired her work. All of a sudden, it's becoming the title of her book, and it's giving her something solid to work with. So here you can see a few examples of different concepts that we have developed for clients. Having and creating that unique positioning makes a huge difference. It gives you a lot of leverage. You feel more confident when you put yourself out there, when you have a concept. But as I said, it's not a must. if you do everything else, but it's a really big cherry on top, like a huge and giant one. So here are a few other examples. And if ever you're curious to understand some of them in chat, you'll have my contact information after, and we can always jump on a call and I can give you other examples that can perhaps spark your own creativity and your own thinking. What I absolutely do want you to work on, however, if you are going to be building your personal brand, is I would like you to work on being intentional with the associations you want to be creating in people's minds. Okay, this is very important. You want to be intentional, you want to be targeted so that those associations are consistent. And those are hard to do because as human beings, we are complex. We can create a whole lot of different associations in people's minds and they're all going to be accurate. But if we're working on a brand, a corporate brand, employer brand, and personal brand, those associations need to be very clearly consistently chosen so that they're uniform. And there are 3 different types of associations I would like you to think of as you start thinking of building a personal brand. Here is the marketing speak for them. So Dana, you're a marketer, you'll be familiar with those, but then I'll explain what they mean. So I'd like you to think of brand descriptors, which is how would you like to be described by others? Okay, how do you want to be perceived? Core content pillars, which is what are you going to be talking about, essentially, to simplify it. And then visual identity, which is still not so popular in personal branding. Of course, it's the leading, although all the other things are still important in corporate branding too, but visual identity is key in corporate brands, not so much in personal brands, but it helps. When we create that clarity in visual identity, again, clear associations, anything that builds associations helps our branding process. So brand descriptors, I'm going to give you a couple of exercises, and they're also in the workbook that you'll receive. Here is part A of the exercise, and then there's part B. Part A, and you're going to do it after. This is not right now. I would like you to think of 3 to 5 adjectives that you would like people to describe you with when they see your name. Okay. So when people see, Bridget, when they see your name, and I don't see your last name, but let's say that when they see your name somewhere, think of how you would want people to describe you. 3 to 5 adjectives. It's really hard because I'm sure you could be described with 100 different adjectives. And if it's hard, first write out all 100 and then prioritize. If it could just be this, could just be this, could just be this, what would I choose? Part B of the exercise, once you're done with this, is survey people. The moment of truth. Text and email people. You can make it confidential if you want the real truth. When we work with executives, we make it confidential. We send it to the whole team, and then the truth comes out. And ask people, what 3 adjectives would you use to describe me? Ideally, not the closest people in your life because it becomes too complex, but people in your professional circles. And then you compare. Look, it's a good exercise in self-awareness because people will typically say very nice things. It's a feel-good exercise. You're going to feel good about yourself. But then when you compare it to what you wrote, if there is a delta, then you have to ask yourself, is it a problem with self-awareness? And that's when there's a delta. Or is it that just, there are other characteristics of yours that are more dominant in people's eyes? And then you decide, do you want to focus on making the ones that you chose be more prevalent to people? Or will you use people's feedback and lean into those? But how do you want to be described consistently? And you can also add, part C to that exercise. How do you not want to be described? And when you think of how you don't want to be described, don't just do antonyms, right? Like if you want to be described as smart, well, obviously you don't want to be described as dumb, but maybe you don't want to be described as pompous. Sometimes when we perceive somebody as, very smart, then we might come off as pompous or condescending or too academic. So just think of how you don't want to be described, and that can help also. It can help guide your content and different things. How would you like others to describe you? Now, visual identity. Get a lot of questions about visual identity because people ask me, is it important? It's not a must in personal branding, but once again, anything that helps recognizability and anything that helps those clear associations with you is a benefit, is a bonus. People who know me know that there's always some kind of red around me. You see, my red slides, my computer bag is red, my suitcase is red. The people started asking me, and it started happening to me that I would get on calls with people and they would say, why are you not wearing red lipstick? But I also do, use and wear other colors as well. But you start building those associations. Visual identity, of course, can be much more complex than a color. And when we work with clients and we develop their visual identity, we do very cool things. So one of the things that we do is we don't call it a logo. We leave it for corporate branding. We call it an emblem. So we do develop emblems for our clients that represent who they are and also have either their names or their initials on those. So you could work with, a designer to help you create that if you want to get, more complex and fancy with your personal brand. And you'll see here the glass of wine because our client, Kate Holden, is a wine queen. She's in the wine business. And the stiletto there that just really represents who she is. You'll see the emblem that we created for our client, Joe. So his full name is Joseph, but you see how we did Joe. His branding and his colors and an emblem that represents him. You'll see the colors and the emblem that we created for our client, Maxine, and all the different components that go into that. So you can see that, of course, same as with corporate branding, when you develop a personal brand, there can be a lot of complexity with your visual identity as well. But start simple. Take that first step. This is what, if you really get into this whole idea of building your personal brand, here's what you can do. Again, either you work with an agency such as mine, or you work with a designer that helps you, or maybe you are very creative yourself and you're able to build it. But start simple. Take that first step so that already you start building towards clear and consistent associations. Start with color. What color would represent you best? Or color scheme if you want several colors. And I'm not saying that you need to automatically just embody it all over the place and wear it all the time and have all your accessories in that color, although it helps. But you can, at the very least, start consistently putting those colors in your visual assets that you're doing, your social media banners. If you're sharing your social media cards online, you can have it there. If you give any type of presentations, you can have your slide decks branded accordingly. You can think of what color or color scheme you can use, once again, consistently, because in branding, it's all about consistency. Finally, your content pillars, what you talk about. This is the most frequent question I get. Okay, Marina, I'm gonna put myself out there. I'm ready. LinkedIn is the platform I wanna be on because it's for business, but what am I gonna talk about? And also a big concern I get from people is, Marina, I don't want to put myself out there because I'm a private person. I don't want to be talking about the coffee I drank and the trip I took and what I did with my kids. I'm a private person, so I'm concerned with putting myself out there. Here is the great news. Okay, so bad news, good news. Bad news, if you're going to be putting yourself out there, if you're going to be building a personal brand, you have to put yourself out there. You're going to have to share some stuff. The good news is, unless you're looking to be a lifestyle influencer, you can be very intentional with not only with what you're going to be sharing, but also with what you're not going to be sharing. And that is the key, again, to creating a strong personal brand, because you create it through consistency and clarity. So here's the advice that I will give you. When you're building your personal brand, you choose 1 to 2 topics that you're going to be talking about on the business side of things. Okay, this is where you talk about what you do, your expertise. This is where you build credibility. 1 to 2 topics, and 1 is okay. Don't be an overachiever and think that you must have 2. 1 is perfectly good. In my case, it's personal branding, and that's what you talk about. And then you think of 1 to 2 topics that will humanize your credibility. 1 to 2 topics that consistently you're going to be talking about that show people who you are. And you stay in your lane and you talk about nothing else. So in my case, I mentioned to you that I talk about obviously personal branding to build my credibility. And then on the personal side of things, I talk about 2 things. 1, immigrant life. Now it includes being Ukrainian, or everything is happening in Ukraine. And number two, what I call lovingly struggle of the juggle. 2 businesses, 2 kids. I'm doing a master's degree. I drop more balls that are still in the air and I share that. And that's what humanizes my brand. I talk about nothing else. I don't talk about gender parity. I don't talk about racial injustice. I don't talk about COVID vaccines because it doesn't fall into those topics. And if it did, then I would talk about it. And I stay in my lane. 1 to 2 for credibility, 1 to 2 to humanize your credibility. And that will be your reflection number 4. What topics would you like to become associated with? Once you complete all that, that's when you decide where you're going to start building that visibility. You see, building a personal brand is not about being on social media necessarily. A lot of people build strong personal brands offline, and you might decide to do that. But of course, social media gives us scale and it gives us a lot more visibility. There are people who write books and give talks, and that's where they build their brand. You choose where. Those are some of the different platforms that you can choose, but you only choose this once you've done all the rest. And typically we do the opposite, right? We say, okay, I'm going to start posting on LinkedIn. We didn't do any of that. Then it doesn't really work as well. Then we get into our head saying, it doesn't work. Nobody cares about what I have to say. But it's because we didn't figure out all the other stuff first. Okay. So then you decide where you're going to be building your personal brand. When I completed my talk in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and when I walked off the stage, there was a lineup of people waiting to ask a question, make a comment, say hello. And in that lineup, there were 2 young women. They came up to me and one of them had her head covered. The other one had her full face covered. I could only see her eyes. And they said, Marina, we wanted to thank you. And yes, the topic and the things you spoke about, that was great. We learned a lot. But we wanted to thank you for being here. You inspired us and you gave us hope. You talked about being a businesswoman and owning a business, but you also talked about being a mom. And you gave us hope that we could too. I got goosebumps in that moment. I got tears in my eyes. I still get goosebumps. It's been it's going to be 4 years. And I don't know if they could. Of course, I live a privileged reality that they don't live, especially as women in Saudi Arabia. But in that moment, I realized that that's where I was going to continue to put myself out there, that's the impact that I could make. So I'm going to leave you with reflection number 5. The final reflection of the day. Whom do you inspire when you decide to stand out? And whom do you impact when you decide to speak up? And whom could you give hope to if you decided to build a radically authentic personal brand? Thank you very much.
Marina, that was absolutely inspiring, amazing. I got goosebumps just as you did, as you told and shared your personal story. So thank you for this incredible information and for making it so tangible, so real. The examples and your own personal storytelling really hit it home for myself. And I'm sure that the others in the audience feel exactly the same way. Now, I know everyone has so much to think about. And if you don't mind, Marina, I'm going to ask you to close your slide and maybe we can do a little bit of Q&A just to get us rocking and rolling and really figure out how to internalize everything we just heard. So I'll invite everybody who has a question just to type it out into the chat. And while we're waiting for that to happen, we did receive some questions in advance. So maybe we can start with those. I won't name names, I'll just read the question. And if you're in the room and it's yours and you want to elaborate, please feel free to give us a little wave. This question goes, I have 20 years of experience. How do I summarize my unique value proposition with so much to work with?
It's a great question. And I get this question quite a bit because at Brand of a Leader, we specifically work with Gen Xers. Okay. So we work with people who have 20 plus years of experience predominantly. And there's so much complexity to put into, right, just one positioning. And there's so much to, to include. And there are still pivots to be had, right? You could have like a much longer career than 20 years and still look for potential pivot. And that is why it is crucial to think of building your personal brand as an expression of who you are and not what you do. And then what you do, depending on your goals, become your speaking points. So for example, my brand positioning is around the concept of standing out, having a voice, and being radically authentic. It applies no matter what I do. Before owning a personal branding agency, I owned a recruitment firm and was all about working with candidates who had a hard time navigating the job market and inspiring them to stand out and helping them find their voice and inspiring them to be radically authentic. I did a lot of employer branding work, and then I did the same with companies, with organizations. I worked with entrepreneur groups, same thing. Now I work with people in personal branding, same thing. I identified what makes me me, and that is the overarching positioning of the brand. And then what I do becomes secondary, right? So when I pivot and change something, and this is the same for all of our clients, when I pivot and change something, for people, it sounds as though there's consistency. It's still the same thing. So that's what becomes hard also to do, because how do you figure out what that unique positioning is? Because you want to, in an ideal world, and that's why we work with concepts, you can boil it down to one word: interiority. Boom. Sometimes two words, sometimes a sentence, but you want to boil it down. You'll see in the workbook through all those different exercises, you're able to do that. And then how you elaborate, well, first you have a word or two, then you have a byline, and then you have a short bio. And then in the bio, you include, and again, abridged, abbreviated version of your career story. That would be the ideal approach.
I love that. Make it manageable, right? And lead with what's most important.
It has to be. And so the thing is, because I noticed that most of us have a hard time answering the question of, well, what do you do? Right? When we ask that question, people either, well, and as you said, women will often downplay, oh, I just, work in this field or industry. I'm like, okay, but what? And then you ask so many follow-up questions like, oh, I'm a vice president of whatever. And then, like, oh, okay, that's the just. Or often people will start answering and replying with the whole, career and everything that you've done. It's too long. If you're able to narrow it down to something, again, that doesn't just speak to, because our titles don't define us. The fact that I own a business doesn't define me. So if people say, Marina, what do you do? Oh, I own a personal branding agency. Okay. No, I help people find their voice and scale its reach. Oh, what do you mean? Well, right now it means personal branding. Who knows what it's going to mean in 5 years from now? That's the true power of having an actual brand positioning.
Amazing. Halima, do you want to explain your question?
Sure, yeah, thanks, Dana. Thank you so much, Marina. This was such a great talk. So my question is really about, like I was saying, I've seen some leaders talking about their personal stories, right? And it just didn't feel authentic because the story's too polished. It just seems like they're trying to humanize themselves. And it's always the same story that you hear, a different version of the same story in different platforms. So there's a point where you realize, okay, this is really strategically meant to humanize them. So I'm wondering how to avoid that.
Again, it's a great question, and it's something that that comes up quite a bit, not only in personal branding, but in corporate branding as well, right? When something's not authentic, we feel it. And that's why you can never outsource your personal brand or creation of content. And most leaders do outsource it because most leaders are not sure how to communicate, not sure how to put themselves out there, maybe also don't even want to be doing that, right? And they feel that if like the internal marketing team does it, it's better. It's not better because we are all now so experienced with content in general and online as well. We feel when it's BS, right? And it's across the board. We feel when it's BS, when it's corporate values, and we're like, those are your values. We know it's not the case. We feel when the voice is not authentic. We feel that when we're just being played and it's marketing speak. So what do you do with that? Number one, you create your own content. You can co-create. So for example, it's a service that we offer to our clients where we ghostwrite, not for them, with them. They provide the content. We just make sure that it's structured in a punchy way, but it needs to sound like them. So that's very important. So you'll see also in the exercises that you do in the workbook, you identify how do you want to sound in a way that's authentic to you, right? For example, there are a few things that you do, a few exercises. You look at your core values, the core values that are really, just you and are very authentic to you. You build on that. You build your tone of voice and how you want to put yourself out there on that. And then storytelling is just a vehicle to communicating, but keeping your core values in mind, keeping your personality in mind, keeping your brand descriptors of how you want to be perceived in mind as well. Now, look, there are some people that are extremely polished. It's just how they are, right? And they write in a way that seems just too not authentic, but then you meet them in real life and they are authentic. That's just how they are. And that's fine as well. So it starts with introspection. It starts really with understanding what is your authentic voice, because what you want to make sure, and it's the most important part, is when people meet you in real life, there must be no delta. People need to meet you if you're, let's say, creating a lot of content online or posting things and say, I feel like I know you already, and not feel like they don't. So my biggest advice would be, if you start putting yourself out there and telling your stories, just be real with them. Don't over rehearse, don't over practice, don't over polish it. If it's a little bit messy and if it's a little bit raw, it's more real and people appreciate that. But it takes vulnerability to accept that and be okay with that, because it's not going to be perfect.
I love that. I think vulnerability plays such an important role in being true to ourselves and also being able to communicate in a way that really connects and resonates with the desired audience. Gabriella, I don't know if you can turn on your camera for a second, but she asked a question. As someone who is committed to consistently evolving, how do you avoid being pigeonholed into the brand identity you create? Hi, Gabriella.
So you want to be pigeonholed into the brand identity you create. If you create a brand identity that's completely rooted in who you are, then you want to be pigeonholed. And that means people are really getting who you are. You don't want to be pigeonholed into creating this very deep connection in people's minds with only what you do. Then you're pigeonholed, yes. And when you're trying to transition, it's really hard. That's why, again, the biggest takeaway you can have from this whole thing and everything I said today is your personal brand is not what you do. It's who you are. What you do is one or two of your talking points. Your brand is who you are. And then, yes, you want to be pigeonholed. You want people to just completely associate you with how you've positioned yourself in your branding, because then they really understand the essence of who you are. It's rooted in authenticity. It's rooted in vulnerability. It's also rooted in a lot of people not liking us. And that's really important too. We play it safe by trying to build a brand around what we do, especially if we do have very strong credentials, because it feels safer. Because when we start showing who we really are, we open the door to a lot of people not liking us. And what people do when they don't like us, especially on social media, is they let us know. And they're not very careful with their words or how they express it, right? I have been called every possible name on social media. I can't even tell you. On LinkedIn, loser, vain, dumb. I'm sure I'm forgetting some. They sting as hell, but I've never deleted a single one, even though it sits there and it burns my heart and my soul. But one thing I will tell you, when we show people truly, authentically who we are, we're not going to be liked by everyone. That's just the truth. But by some people, we're going to be loved. Like really loved, like we're really going to inspire and impact people. So that's the trade-off. That's the trade-off. We're playing it safe and we're just building our brand identity. It's not really even a brand, but let's say on what we do, we're likely going to be liked by people more than not liked, not going to be loved by anyone. We're not going to have that ability to inspire that many people. So we want to be pigeonholed, to answer your question, Gabriela, but pigeonholed into really what our brand is, which is who we are and not what we do.
Any follow-up, Gabriela? I know the context of your question when you're combining your, professional vocation with your personal identity, with your passions, your hobbies and everything. It just creates such a dynamic proposition, and you should leverage every aspect of it.
Yes, you just leverage it in a different way. So there's a positioning that somehow expresses it, as I said, through a word, 2 words, or, a sentence. So there's something that just expresses it. And you see, when we work with clients and helping them through this, it's a series of 3 deep dives. We'll look at everything, all those different components, the hobbies and the passions and the core values and what you've done professionally. We'll look for an underlying common denominator that serves as that concept word or 2 words or, a sentence in some cases. That's what you want to do first. And then all those, and again, I don't know, Gabriela, your context and your situation, but then all those different things, you express them as content pillars, as we call them, those different topics. But I can tell you, when people really understand the essence of who we are, it's expressed very, very clearly. That's our brand. People kind of care less about the what of what we do. And we work with so many people that are in transition, pivots, and all those different situations, career pivots or entrepreneurial.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And we have a tactical question that came in before. How much time needs to be invested in building a personal brand?
So the first time investment that happens is that whole process of understanding, uncovering your personal brand. Okay, so that everything that I spoke about as far as introspection, figuring out your positioning, what are going to be your core content pillars, that piece takes time. When we work with clients on that piece, it takes us anywhere of 4 to 8 weeks, depending on how fast the clients go through the cadence of calls. So 4 to 8 weeks for us, we develop that. For you, it depends on, again, how fast you're going to go with it. And then how much time it takes to build a personal brand and your time commitment. Depends on a few things. It depends on where you're going to be building your visibility, right? So let's say you're just leveraging social media. Let's say you're just going to leverage LinkedIn. Okay, for example, I'm giving LinkedIn as an example. That's what we help clients with as well, because in the professional arena, it's predominantly LinkedIn. And of course, depending on your field, could be other platforms. Let's say it's LinkedIn. What you want to do so LinkedIn is great for standing out and creating visibility, because believe it or not, it's the most underused social media platform. Okay, it looks like it's very busy, of course, because there's a lot of people on it, but only less than 1% of people on LinkedIn, less than 1%, post 3 times a week or more. Okay, so if you commit to posting on LinkedIn 3 times a week, even if it's mediocre content, but hopefully it's going to be good content, but even if it's mediocre, just by that, you automatically go into the bucket of being the most active users on LinkedIn. What happens then is LinkedIn algorithm favors you. You go to the top of people's feeds, right? Because on LinkedIn, when you open LinkedIn, you're not seeing it in timeline format, right? Sometimes you might see like this person on top or that one, regardless of when they post it. So you go to top. This is great, whether you're looking to build visibility for your career progression or visibility because you are an entrepreneur and you're looking for visibility with clients. Well, being on top of the feeds of people that follow you, this is a great advantage. What you want to do to make sure that your time commitment is not humongous is you want to create a system. So when we work with clients on co-creating content, they invest, let's say, an hour a week to giving us raw content that then we repurpose into written content. If you do it yourself, it depends on, well, how fast do you create written content? Here's the system that I recommend that works really well, because to be consistent and systematic with it is key, because you're going to save a lot of time, right? So here's what I recommend. It's the process we follow with our clients, and it's the process you can follow if you're going to do it on your own. So number one, every month we give our clients a list of questions that fall into the content pillars that we've developed for them. Okay. So for example, if I were doing this for myself, my first content pillar is personal branding. I would create for myself first a list of questions. Some of those would be questions you ladies asked me today, right? So now I have some questions to answer. Those are my questions. You can think of whatever questions that would show, when you answer them, that would show your expertise. Questions you often get from colleagues, employees, when you're training somebody, clients, from whoever. Build yourself a list of questions for each pillar. So for me, there would be a list of questions on personal branding, a list of questions on immigrant life, and a list of questions on struggle of the juggle. Okay. First, you build a list of questions. We do that for clients every month. There's a new list. Then you sit down and you just create raw content answering those questions. What works really great is voice notes. Okay. Because with voice, we don't overthink and overcorrect things. Okay. So just take your phone and let's say the question is, I don't know, Marina, why did your family immigrate to Canada? I don't know. Oh, my family immigrated to Canada because no. You take that, you can flip it into a transcript after. So then you have written text that you can work with and polish out. Okay. You can use Otter AI. It's a great platform for that. Otter, like the animal, OTTER.ai. You take that voice note. So first questions, then all the voice recordings answering those questions. Then you flip them into transcripts. And then you edit them out into creating content. So creating questions for yourself for the whole month, half an hour. Doing voice notes, depending on how chatty and verbose you are, 2 hours. That's like you're really chatty. And then editing that content and writing out posts depends on how much of a writer you are, right? Or if somebody can help you with that. Because once you've created those voice notes, if you have somebody on your team or somebody around that's a good writer, then they can help you because they're already taken with those transcripts and creating something punchy out of it. That's where you can actually seek out help, and then somebody posts it for you or you post it for you. If you leverage LinkedIn, you see, if you follow this plan, it's just a few hours and you spread it out in the whole month, right? You can dedicate an hour per week and be very consistent with it. And then how long it takes for you to start creating momentum and seeing people reach out to you, hear people say, oh my God, do you live on LinkedIn now? Because you're there all the time, and you're not there all the time. You just pre-scheduled your stuff consistently. It takes about 6 months for you to start having that, consistency. Within a year, you will really start seeing a lot of opportunities come your way, a lot of, payoff on that visibility that you created.
As a follow-up to that, once you have, your pillars established and your content arrived, what happens if you fall off the bandwagon? So you're, constantly posting, you're really good at it, and then life happens, you get off track, and, you're very sporadic. One, what is sort of the backlash on that? And two, how can you remotivate yourself to get back on track?
So let me answer the first part and then second. So first, that happens to all of us, right? Unless your work is creating social media content, you fall off the process because other things take precedence. So it happens. The price to pay for that is that you rebuild an engagement again, right? Because now you're not in the top most active users on LinkedIn. So all of a sudden you start posting. People are just not seeing your content, right? Until you, for a certain time period, a couple of months, posted very consistently 2 to 3 times a week at the same time, ideally, same days of the week. Until you've built that consistency, you're posting, but people don't see it. Social media platforms might just not show them that content. What happens then? What do we say? We say, oh, my content sucks. Nobody cares about what I have to say. We get in our heads, right? So when we get over that hump and finally create that consistency, then we fall off the horse. When we get back on it, we just have to not care about the fact that, again, there's not going to be a lot of engagement. It's not representative necessarily of the quality of our content or whether or not people care about us. It's just the algorithm is not showing it to people. We have to just accept that. So that's what happens, right? So you're just rebuilding that engagement from scratch. That's question number 1. Question number 2, how you motivate yourself to do it is you go back to that first reflection point that I asked you to think of is, why are you doing it? What's your why to be doing this? And your why that will motivate you to do this is going to be much more powerful and stronger if it has nothing to do with anything transactional. Okay. If your only why is to have visibility for clients, leads, opportunities, and these are still valid because you get all of those. But if that's your only motivating factor, it's hard to sustain, because the moment you have a lot of clients, or the moment you just landed an amazing new job, or you got a promotion, or you just already hired your whole team, you feel like, oh, it's not a priority for me to have visibility. However, if your motivating factor is you want to have a voice, you have a story to tell, you can inspire someone. Who cares if they're going to become a hire, an employer, or I don't know, a client? Who cares? You inspire someone. They're going to send you a message and say, you know what? I've been reading what you've been writing, and you showed me that I too could. And if that is your point of motivation, you're more likely to continue doing it, because it gives you that, you know, if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, getting clients and job promotions and higher salary, it's at the bottom. It's not the biggest motivator. It's still important. It's not the biggest motivator. But if you want to create a community around yourself, that sense of belonging, you want to achieve self-actualization through impacting other people, that's at the top. It's an easier motivator. So if you write it down, you know, why would you put yourself out there? And then every time you're like, why am I doing this again? You go and read it. It's likely going to re-motivate you to get back on the proverbial horse.
Amazing. I love that. And it's the perfect segue into our sort of interactive portion of today's session. I'd really love to focus on the reflection that Marina just reiterated. So why do you want to build a personal brand? Why is it so important to you? What I'd like to do is open up a couple of breakout rooms. We'll divide up in groups, and you'll have 5 minutes to sort of discuss and put some thought into this question, which is still in the chat. So we'll see you back in a couple of minutes. Marina, I popped you into a room. Feel free to go or to stay. I don't know if Lisa is actually here or if it's like a lag issue, but either way, thank you so much. That was incredible. I feel really privileged that I got to hear you speak. I'm always so curious when I see your posts and all of your amazing content about the types of things that you talk about, but you really put it forth in a really compelling manner.
I'm so glad. I hope that it's going to, you know, sparkle and inspire some thinking and some reflections, and that there's value to your awesome community. That's the most important part.
Yeah, thank you. And I know, just was noticing people in and out. So we did manage to get to our 21, which was my guesstimate. So I think that's really fantastic. And I'm sure it will be well shared and appreciated in the recording as well.
Awesome. That's why I was here. That's the goal.
I'm going to
If
stop.
at least one person starts putting themselves out there,